Good morning, everyone. People can see and hear me okay. Someone can give me a thumbs up. So I see we have 50 of our friends here. Okay, thanks, Adil. So, good morning. It is Monday, May the 18th. And we have a nice rain this morning. Rained a little hard even during the morning meditation, which somehow triggered a pleasant sensation in my mind. So, now it's eased off a little bit, but it's still raining. And maybe a good day to do some work inside. I was talking to my mother yesterday, and she was astounded to realize that it's been 40 years since the eruption of Mount St. Helens. When she first mentioned it, she said, "I can't believe Mount St. Helens." And I was like, at first I thought she was talking about the present. I was like, what's up with Mount St. Helens? And then she said, "It's been 40 years. Can you believe that?" And I guess the answer is yes, I can. But yeah, for those who aren't so familiar with the geography of our home here, we're not too far from Mount St. Helens. If I climb up certain hills here, I can see it. But I grew up in Vancouver, Washington, just across the river from Portland, Oregon, and Mount St. Helens was a constant feature of our skyline, and we used to spend time up there. And when I guess I would have been 11, it had a spectacular eruption, which made the world news. So, and I've been up there. I've been continuing to try to go up there from time to time. A very interesting ecosystem and environment to watch. Both how it was affected by the early eruptions, and then the bigger eruption, which caused a massive landslide on the north part of the mountain. Essentially, in the north side of the mountain, blew out, slammed in a ridge just north of it, and remade the whole landscape. And sometimes get the opportunity to go up there once every couple of years or so since I've moved back to the Northwest. And it's interesting to see how that ecosystem adjusts and, one could say, restores itself or comes back, but that's an idea. I mean, they're just ecosystems, and they're just doing what they do according to causes and conditions. So, and it's interesting to watch those change and unfold, and there's certain beauty to it. Okay, I think most everyone's here, so maybe we'll get going, and I'll set aside the chit chat and the news for another day. So there's a few people in here who remember it as well. So Heather was living nearby, and Michelle living in Seattle and was 13 at the time. So yeah, I like your reflection, Michelle. Humbling. As is a pandemic, isn't it? Who thought they would be living like this right now and have their plans altered in this way? Not humbling. It puts the life of a human being and humans in perspective. So maybe before I give a reflection, I think Dinka had a question early on that's on theme. So I might go straight to um, fielding some questions, and then maybe I'll give a little reflection after that. So, on the subject of restraint, indulgence, and consequences of such, can you say something about the difference between sensory, the five senses, and mental, the mind pleasures? Yeah, I can say something about that. I mean, I think one important thing which we have touched on recently is that when we talk about um, the investigation of Vedana, we include all six senses. Uh, so we don't separate out perceptions, emotions, ideas, and the feeling effect that accompanies those separately from the other sense bases: sight, taste, sound, smell, touch, etc. And they play this very much the same role. And there are people of certain bent or type, and that might be a huge part of their strategy for finding satisfaction in the world and happiness in the world, as we talked about yesterday, is through the pleasures of the mind. So um, it is something to be lumped in together with certain dhammas. In talking about the hindrances, though, the first kama chanda, which we were talking about yesterday, really is talking about the five senses. So it's excluding mental pleasures for some reason. It's just the way it's defined there. I'm not so sure. I mean, that I understand why in particular it's broken out. Because if you consider, as Ajahn Sona has reflected on those first two as the chief obstacles to mental clarity and the development of our meditation, the development of samadhi, it seems reasonable that it could go either way. And we could lump in sort of pleasures of the mind. Ultimately, it's all implicated, and the teachings we find in the suttas, when the Buddha talks about mind and body, there's a very interesting sutta where he says you can't completely separate these out. They arise dependent on each other. They rely dependent on each other. Not unlike even the way we think about it, or some people think about it, in modern times, and even secular thinkers and scientific thinking. If we look closely at the experience of mind and body, they are deeply connected, dependent, reliant upon each other. And I'll be surprised if the science starts moving in any other direction from that. So, and we don't need to know the nitty-gritty details of it. I mean, but there are many kind of interesting teachings where the Buddha talks about how they're like two shafts of wheat that are leaning on each other, drying in the wheat field. So if you take one away, the other falls. So you don't get mind without body or body without mind. Not in the human realm. So, and then this caught my attention early on before we got started. There's a question from Susan here in White Salmon. Susan B. Is there any value to investigate the reason why the hindrance came up, or just focus on removal and replacement? There is, Susan, but I think one has to be really careful there. There's a teaching that I think is very useful, and I think you're familiar with, called the removal of distracting thoughts. And it's a tiered strategy, 5 strategies for dealing with hindrances. And investigating the reason why comes down the list. And I think the ordering of the list is not accidental. The first one is merely to replace it. And I think the reason why an investigation would come as a later strategy, if the first one is not working, you need to move to plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E, is because it's a little more difficult and sticky. So this will be more important depending on sort of where you're at in the cultivation of the mind. If the mind is like moving into a more subtle, non-discursive space with its meditation, and there's a hindrance that's coming up, you don't want to re-engage that part of the mind that is bound up with discursiveness and reasoning or something. So one useful thing is just see if you can sort of try to replace it. Be a little leery of too quickly moving to the investigation of the reason why. We will learn in time, especially if we're watching carefully, how it is that these things arise, how it is that they are maintained or resolved, and how it is that they cease to arise through the cultivation of our practice in the path. So a kind of happy middle place, which is a little less sticky, a little less dangerous, is just to quickly ask the question. If you don't get answers, move on. Because you don't want to get too bound up in asking yourself, why? But you can quickly reflect sometimes. And that's even outside of a meditative application of this approach. I would say as we move through our day, that's also not a bad way of dealing with things. Ask why. It's good to ask the question or reflect on that, and then listen for any information, any sort of sense, and see what it is that you can kind of learn, but don't get overly kind of hung up in it. The stronger the mind is, the weaker the hindrances are, and the more there is this quality of samadhi, like stability of mind, the less danger it is to engage in that investigation, because the mind has a strong anchor, and it's rich, and there's the mature aspects of mind to keep it from getting confused or lost. So that kind of might add a little bit of nuance to my answer there. So okay, practicing scanning the questions so we can get back to the present moment here. Let's see. On topic, Zuri, question 1, is plan A to dissolve, replace it by contemplating anicca? No, Zuri, plan A is just to simply replace. So replace an unskillful thought with a skillful one. So I wouldn't use the word dissolve, but replace. And it's not specified by contemplating anicca, it's just merely the substitution. So, and if you think about trying to care for one's mind as we move through the day, I would say anything will do. Any skillful thought will do. And many of the milder forms of the hindrances can easily just be replaced like that, especially as we develop a sense of heedfulness and an appropriate fear even of allowing these guys to hang out, allowing these unskillful, deluded emotional states to dominate our experience. So just to replace it. So, and it can be as simple as you start noticing irritation or agitation, frustration arising in the mind, and you take a deep breath and just knock it out by inducing a sense of patience or kindness or forgiveness or anything really that will sort of shift us from the move towards the negative to something that is more skillful and positive. So, and then your follow-up question here, is there a significance to the order? I'm surprised that ill will isn't first since it's a greater stain. Oh, so that's not, so you're talking there to the order of the five hindrances. I've never thought about that, but the first two are often paired, and you find them coming in pairs in many suttas, whereas the following three, the dullness, oftentimes, or what I call lethargy, restlessness, and doubt, you see those left off sometimes. And I think it's fair to understand sometimes that the Buddha is summarizing. Remember, he's in dialogue with people. He's asking them questions and counter questions, and they're responding, and he's reflecting. And it's tedious to every time go down some sort of set list. He probably didn't talk that way. So sometimes he'll just mention covetousness and grief in regard to the world or in relationship to the world. And we can take that as a stand-in for he's referring to the hindrances, in particular the five hindrances. So, and if you want to be more global about it, he's talking about unskillful states of mind. So whatever they are. And there's all kinds of lists. We have the threefold list: greed, hatred, and delusion. We have the five hindrances. We have the asavas. To me, one of the more extensive lists is the 16 upakilesas. So that's a nice little research project for people to look up. So, okay, and Cher had the same question during the retreat, so good. I'm glad we got to that. Charles. Good morning, Charles. I find the metaphor of inducing joy are positive qualities of mind to invite appropriate intention, energy, and action. The metaphor of inducing joy are positive qualities of mind to invite appropriate intention, energy, and action. Well, inducing joy and arousing skillful states of mind is part of right effort, at the very least. So, Samrit, good morning. Dear Ajahn, when you say doubt is a defilement, is it related to doubt on the path of doubt, a path of Dhamma, or doubt about other people's intentions, which at times is essential to keep us protected? Yeah, I mean, it's skeptical doubt, and most teachers and commentators will define that as doubt in relationship to the Dhamma. You can expand that also to the practice and application of the Dhamma, and that's made much of in the commentaries. So if you're doubting what it is that you should do with your mind in the middle of meditation, especially, that is a big hindrance. So we need to have clear intention and a clear strategy. And if we don't, then some of the hindrance of doubt is going to plague our practice in the development of the mind. So, but bigger than that is doubts about the Dhamma, doubts about the efficacy of this intentional way of engaging the mind. So, and those really keep one spinning around in circles and will definitely impede your progress. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Ajahn Sona's spatial way of talking about the hindrances. It's something I kind of like. It's another way to map the Dhamma to our experience. But he talks about it sort of as the first hindrance of kamachanda, or sense desire, is like leaning out, trying to pull things towards you. So, and then ill will, anger, ill will is the opposite, trying to sort of push away. And then dullness is sinking down, and restlessness is rising up, spinning out, if you will. And skeptical doubt is going round and round in circles. So it's an interesting way to contemplate the five hindrances and how they move the mind. So that's nice. Question from Shelley here. Good morning, Shelley. Will you sometime in the future distinguish hindrances, fetters, and defilements? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could do. I don't think we'll go there today. And let's see, Dantika is still here. What is meant by investigation of the Dhamma in dealing with removal of the hindrances? Investigation of the Dhamma. The removal of the hindrances. I'm not sure exactly where that reference is coming from. Dantika, oh, you have a follow-up here. Is it the analysis of the hindrance, like looking into the reasons for it? Or is it investigation like in Vipassana practices, just noting the hindrance as such? Well, there is something like using a kind of one interpretation of the fourth of the five strategies for removing distractive thoughts is kind of looking into it or investigating in it. And but I think people can rightfully disagree about what that is. It's like, it has a curious analogy. And it's like, suppose a man was running, he would think, why am I running? I should walk fast. Why am I walking fast? And then he walks slow. Why am I walking? I should stand. Why am I standing? I should sit. Why am I sit? I should lie down, or something like this. And so it's this analogy of somebody moving from a very energetic course, or you could even say sort of restless sort of thing, and then moving progressively into a state that is more peaceful and refined. And some people interpret or take that as an encouragement to, through investigation, resolve the hindrance that is plaguing the mind. So I tend to just think of that analogy as pointing to a progressive approach to removing the hindrance. Sometimes I think about it as like talking yourself down. Like, suppose you're really angry. You can't just switch on a dime and all of a sudden arouse this profound loving kindness and forgiveness for the object of your anger. And then you move to plan B, which is sort of reflecting on sort of like what a stain, what a toxin, what a poison an angry mind is, how unbeautiful it is, how how it's disparaged by the Buddha and the wise, it still doesn't do anything. It's like your friends sort of, when you're really worked up, saying, now, don't get angry, and you like brush them off, like, uh, doesn't work. And inattention doesn't work. Like, if the emotion is in full bloom, you can't just ignore it. The whole mind and body is engaged. You're flooded with a kind of chemistry, the chemistry of anger and that emotional response, and the mind is reverberating angry thoughts and evidence of why it is you should be angry, and it's exploring and generating a proliferation of ideas about what you should do about it, how you should react based on the anger. You can't just use inattention if it's so strong. So we come to this plan D, which is a progressive either investigation or literally talking yourself down. So, you might be able to challenge the level of the intensity of the anger and frustration, thinking like, why am I this angry? Do I really need to react like this? Or try to inject some sense, some analysis of the quality of the unskillful thought that's dominating the mind, to break it down. So I think of it as a progressive approach, because these other three have not yet worked. And if this progressive approach doesn't work, whether it's an investigation or a talking yourself down or some way of working your way towards resolution of it, the final strategy in this 5 method is like suppression, so that you don't say or do anything to further compound the problem, and just to give a chance for the conditions to change. So, um, so I don't know if that is kind of where you were pointing at, Dantika, but that's where I would reflect and go with that. So, let's see. And one more. I meant investigation of the Dhamma as one of the 5 strategies for removing the hindrance. Okay, well, hopefully I spoke to that. So, embedded in that removal of distracting thoughts, which, if you're not familiar with that teaching, Ajahn Sudanto does have some stuff on his channel, and also you can just go to Sutta Central or Access to Insight and look up this teaching, the removal of distracting thought. Also, the removal of a grudge. Both these are very good practical teachings of how to work with the mind, and in particular, how to work with the hindrances. So, the 5 means of removing distracting thought. I think many of the English translators have just titled it the removal of distracting thought. So, and then what is it? The four or 5 ways of removing a grudge is also a very good companion to that. And I believe there's a talk on Ajahn Sumato's channel that goes into that. So, all right. Well, this is nice. It kind of organically moved. Oh, Scott's got a reference for us here. Thank you. The Majjhima Nikaya 20. Remove distracting thoughts. So look for Majjhima 20, folks, if you want to revisit that. And that's your homework today. If you don't have that one in mind, that might be a good one to look at. So let's see. We have another one here from Zuri. Side question, following up from yesterday, I didn't realize there were 2 PTS dictionaries. Is the recent one by Margaret Core? Yes, that is. That's the newer one. And it's excellent. It's really a kind of wonderful book. It's a bit expensive. It's interesting investment, but it's like more than a dictionary. So, okay, well, this is nice. I like how this happened organically. I want to keep these unscripted. I usually try to come with some sort of idea. And this morning I was thinking about talking a bit about the second hindrance of Bhayapada, anger, ill will, and the whole spectrum of that. But we will leave that for another day. So, good day, friends. Have a nice day, and don't forget to pay attention. And we'll see you tomorrow morning. Bye for now.